one is workflow and other one is methods. Okay. So most of the cases, these are the one-time activities or one-time setups which we do when we try to implement or when we try to do a new customization, uh, or when we are trying to introduce a new functionality, custom process. Okay. So workflow setup is done from the workflow manager, where method is done from the business modeler. So method is 2 steps. Okay, I'll go through that. So just to summarize, we'll talk about these two in detail. As I said, it's like we have two set of workflows. One are the predefined workflows and other one is the custom workflows. So predefined workflows are the one which comes by default when you install Demantra. So for each module you have a set of default workflows or predefined workflows. Each has their own functionality or importance. In addition to that, based on the requirement, we can create a new workflows also. Okay. So generally what the workflow does is, it is like executing set of steps in a sequential order, in a batch wise or in a or for a selected data points. And the way you access the workflow manager is a web-based tool. So prior to 12 versions and 7.3 versions, right? So we used to access the workflow manager or workflow window using the URL from the browser. But now this total Demantra application, the way we use changed. So now we have only one generic login that you do from the local application. So once you log into the window, so from the same window you can access the worksheets as well as the workflows. Okay. So when it was on a web-based access, we used to have a lot of Java dependencies to open and define the workflows, to edit the workflows. So if the web browser is not compatible to Java, right? Sorry, with the Demantra workflows, then we used to get a lot of errors. So we never used to able to open the workflow definitions. We never used to open the definition if the browser, Demantra and Java are in not in sync, if they're not compatible. Okay. Now in the latest versions, that issue is resolved. So if you are able to open the worksheets, then you should be able to open the workflow definitions also. You should be able to edit them. Okay. So it's a set of events which we execute in a sequential order. It could be like there's so many types of steps in the workflow definition. I'll show you the steps when I go to the application. So when we create any workflow, right, or if you see any existing workflows in the workflow manager or workflow management window, it will show a list of workflows. And in addition to that, similar to a series grouping, right, where you group the set of series together, in a similar manner, we can group the workflows also into a group. Like for example, similar kind of workflows into one group, or workflows which go to a certain functionality into one group. So we can group the workflows also. So this int gist status is a table where you can monitor the workflow status. And there's one more table, wf underscore process log, and there's one more portal underscore task table. So there you can monitor the workflow status also in addition to that. Okay. So there are 3 tables. In general, we use the WF process log and portal underscore task table to monitor the workflow progress. When you launch any workflows, to check the status of the workflow, we use those 2 tables. So this is just an example it has given, just for an understanding purpose. So this is a seeded workflow approval process. So whenever user approves any, modifies any workflow forecast in the system, so Demantra comes up with a seeded functionality for the approval process. So here it is giving, showing a different set of steps. Like for example, the first step, right? It's a procedure step, and the second one is a Linux step, which executes Linux script. And again, next is a procedure step, then approval methodology and notification. So you can add a number of steps in the workflow, but it should be a sequential order, and you have to mention the start point of the workflow. So this is a high level picture of the workflow. When you edit any workflow, this is how the window comes up. So on top you can see the workflow name, top left corner, workflow name, and the live checkbox is nothing but whether you want to keep the workflow active or not. You can use that option. Okay, and these are steps in a sequential order which are connected with the arrow mark, and whichever step you has a star icon, right? So that represents the starting point of the workflow. So it triggers in a sequential order. And your save and validate option. So whenever you create any workflow, you can validate the definition whether the workflow is valid or not. So in a newer versions, in 12 after 12 versions, so there's one more function introduced to the workflow management. You can copy the workflows also. In older versions, if you want to replicate or if you want to duplicate the existing workflow, so what we used to do is we used to take the screenshot of all those steps and recreate the entire workflow from the scratch. Okay, but in latest versions, there's an option called I think save as option. So save as option, you can use the you can duplicate the existing workflow. No need to recreate from the scratch. Okay, I'll show you these screenshots in the workflow. So these are one more window in the workflow definition. When we include any step in the workflow, so it gives like when to notify the user, when to time out the workflow if it's not completing on time. So different set of action items you can give in the workflow step. I'll ignore this. I'll show in the application all this stuff. We'll go to the methods later. Let's go to the workflows first. So if you want to check only the DM specific workflows, maybe you can go here and you can check the demand management. Okay. So these all talks about the workflow specific to the demand management. Okay. That's how we can get the workflow specific to a different module, or you can create a own group also. Like if you want to keep a bunch of workflows into a separate group based on the requirement, based on the activities, you can do that by using the new option here. Okay, so when I click on the new option, generally it will ask you for the group name. Okay, and you can select the workflows whichever you want. Just for timing and select one or two here. Just click OK. Okay, so this training group was only these two workflows. Okay, this is how you can create the workflow groups. You know? And if you want to create any new workflows, right? So on top, on bottom right corner, there's something called new schema, right? So schema is nothing but a workflow here. So when you click on a new schema, it will allow you to create a new workflow. So if I click over here, so it comes up with the window with the edit option where you can add new steps to the workflow.
I have one question.
Yes.
If we create a group, is it public or private? Like my user will only be able to see that group, or all users will be able to see that group?
All users will be able to see that workflow group.
Oh, okay. There's no way that we can do for just our user, so that when I log in, then only I can see it.
Maybe I have to check that one later.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a private and public option here.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, you can do that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So let me try to open a new workflow here. So this is how the edit window looks like. So here you can give the workflow name here. For example, training. So, then this live checkbox. So if you make it enable, then it's active. You can use for the trigger. Then as I said, right, so there are three options here. So earlier the save as was not there. It's recently introduced in 12 versions. So save is to save the definition of the workflow, and validate is once you add all the steps in the workflow, just to check whether the workflow is valid or not, you can use this validate option. If you want to make a copy of the existing workflow, you can use the save as option. So these are the options. So on the left side, right, you have the list of action items, right, which you can use for the which you can use in creating a workflow. But in general, 99% of cases, when you go for a custom workflow site, the steps what we use is store procedure step is a mostly used step, okay, and the transfer step is the other one, and launch workflow step is the other one. So these are the mainly used, and email step sometimes we use it to send the notifications to the user. And if you want to execute any shell script, Linux commands, you go for the exe commands, okay. So and user step to notify the user. So these are different steps used, but rest all we don't use much when you go for the custom workflows. And I have also not used almost all, like all the steps. Generally we use these steps mainly when you go for the customization, okay. So I'll go to the steps which I know, rest all I'll ignore because I also not used all these workflows steps. So store procedure steps, generally when you go for this step, right, so it will ask you for the procedure name and what are the parameters you want to pass to the particular step, okay. So if you want to access any any procedure which is in the app schema, you can do that. So always you have to prefix the procedure name with the app schema id, then you can happily access the procedure package which is in the app schema on the vcp side, on the AACP application instance, not on the EBS one, okay. And you can add the parameters to the workflow. So there's a parameter window here. So using this, you can add a multiple parameters here, okay. So only drawback here in the workflows is these parameters are not dynamic, okay. So these are static parameters. Like once you save the definition, right, with the parameter list, so whenever you trigger the workflow will run for those predefined or already given values in the parameter list. So you cannot change dynamically. So if you want to change the parameters of the workflow, then you have to come to this workflow and you have to change it manually, then retrigger the workflow, okay. It's not like a concurrent program where you can dynamically change it. So we'll create one dummy workflow after going through the steps, okay. Then there's something called transfer step. So we'll talk about this in detail when we talk about the import and export functionality in Demantra. But for time being, this step mainly used to do two set of activities. One is when you are trying to import the data from the outside system to the import process, okay. So when we loaded the data to the staging table, we loaded to the staging table set, TSS sales table, item and location table. Apart from that, if you want to load the other set of data for the existing combinations in Demantra through a CSV, that we can do through the import functionality, okay. There's something called import integration functionality in Demantra. So when you use that functionality, the data comes to a different set of staging tables. From there it loads to the base tables using the import functionality, okay. And there's something called export functionality. So if you want to export any data which is there in Demantra from the sales data table, you can use the export functionality. So the main use of this transfer step is to import or export the data from Demantra to Demantra, okay, two-way process. So there's the reason you have two options, import or export. So we'll talk about this later when we talk about the import profiles in detail. And the other important one is this launch workflow step. So if you are creating any custom workflow and if you want to trigger a child workflow within a master workflow, okay. So in that cases you can use this as a you can use this workflow step. Similarly, like it's like a request set, for example. So request set, generally what we do is we group a list of concurrent programs in a sequential order. So whenever you launch a request set, it triggers all the concurrent programs in a sequential order. In the similar manner, so if you are creating any master workflow, so if you want to call all the child workflows in a sequential order, so you can add all those workflows using this particular step, okay. So it gives all the workflow details here, what are the workflows configured in the system. And this is an email notification. So if you want to send the emails to the user once the completion of the workflow, you can use this particular step, okay. For this we need that setup on the DB side. We have to enable that mail notification setup in the DB, then this works, okay. So these are the few steps we generally use when you create any new workflows. I don't think any other steps are much important. We can ignore this. So let me try to create a one simple workflow which gives a basic idea how it works. So for that, what I'll do is I'll just try to create a one simple procedure and database. So I'll try to refer a table just to show an example. So this is a seeded table, okay, DB exception log. So it stores all the log information. If something goes wrong in the workflow, this will store the specific set of details. So just for timing, what I'll try to do is I'll try to add a record to this table using a workflow trigger. So right now we have a maximum record with the date of today's date, sorry, day before yesterday's, that is 13th December, right? So we'll try to create one record in this table with a custom procedure, okay? Mm, with a custom step here. Uh, so this seeded procedure for this to insert a record to this particular table, okay? There's something called debex, okay? If I open this procedure, so generally it will talk about the three parameters: message, procedure, and procedure type. So message type, okay? So when it's talking about the message type, so when you're trying to execute this particular procedure, so you should mention or you should tell the system to which staging table you want to insert the data. Okay, there are list of staging tables, predefined staging table in Mantra. So these are all the list of tables. So based on the parameter value you pass to it, okay, if you see here, by default it is passed E. Okay, E is nothing but DB exception log somewhere here. Okay, if I pass parameter as A, it will go to DB audit log. So based on the parameter you pass, the log message will capture in that particular table. Okay, so mostly these tables are these log tables are this one. DB exception log is the one. Okay, and DB call log is the one. So these are the mostly used uh, log files, log tables when you want to capture any custom errors. Most of the custom developments when we do, right, we try to capture the things in these particular tables. So just for timing, what I'll do is I'll just try to create a custom workflow with a simple procedure step to load the data to that DB exception log table. Okay. So just give the procedure name here and add the parameters now. The three parameters, right? So start. So if I want to write to exception log table, just give as a E option. Okay, save it. So now this step has this star icon. So it says that it's the starting step of the workflow. If I include the next step, right? So it will not get that icon. So it's the next step. Okay, so we have to link these two steps by clicking on this arrow mark. So from this next icon to this arrow, this is how we can link this different steps in a workflow. So for just for timing, I'll keep only one step. So when I validate it, so bottom you see this schema is valid. Just save this one. So whenever creating any workflow, no need to bounce the server. It gets auto reflected by default. So if you go here, so it has created a new workflow with the schema ID 1792. Okay, so this is a DM user specific workflow. Since I created a workflow from the DM user and I logged in from the DM user, you see all the options are enabled. You can edit the workflow, you can start it, you can schedule it, and you can delete it also. Okay, so just will trigger the workflow and you will see the other options also. So I'll start it. It will complete very fast. It completed. Okay, so because it's just trying to capture the data, right? So it should be very fast. It has created record here, and this is what we try to. So in similar way, you can write any you can call any custom procedure, custom logic in the workflow steps. Okay, so now when you create any workflow where actually these workflow definitions are saved, so there's a table called wf schemas. Okay. So this is a place where you can see the workflow definitions. Okay, so this is a workflow definition which I created, access log exception table, right? So this is a schema ID and this is a schema data. So I'll explain how to read this. Okay, um, this is a clog column. Okay, it's not a varchar, so you cannot apply a where condition on this particular table. Okay. So if you want to see the definition of any workflow, you have to export this to the Excel and you have to go for a search. You cannot write a where class for this column. Okay. Status of the workflow is one. It's a valid status, and owner is 387. That is DM user, and today we have created in last modified is today's date. Okay, now let's try to understand how we wrote this sequence. Okay, so I'll try to take the known workflow Itka, which you are regularly using, right? So
That EP load one.
sorry.
EP load one.
Yeah, EBS full download. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
okay, this is EBS full download. Okay, so I'll try to go here. So let's try to understand. Okay, better to paste it here. So let's assume you don't have access to the business, workflow manager and you want to understand uh, which step is running. Okay, or which step gets executed after which step. Okay, so I'll show you how to read this. Okay, so there's a table called. Okay, so whenever you launch any workflow, right, so if the workflow is in, if it is in running status, so this status column will show as 1 in the wf process log table. Okay, and this is a process ID which would be pointing to your process ID when you trigger the workflow. So for example, if I go to the process log, right, so when I launch this particular custom workflow which just I triggered, right, so this is a process ID which is created. Okay, so if I check with this in this particular table. Okay, 1792 is the one which it got triggered. Okay, since we triggered only one workflow, we has only one particular record in this. Okay, now let's assume if you have multiple steps in the workflow, from the back end, how can you identify which step is running and what is the next step it's going to trigger? Okay, if you have access to the workflow, you can easily identify. The way you can identify is whenever the workflow is running, right, if you click on this status icon, right, so it will show you which workflow is running. Let me trigger here just for time being, so that we can understand. So I'll trigger this for timing. Okay, I'll start it. So if you see this, it's running the load item step. Okay, so if I go here, if I click on this edit option, I can understand which is the load item step. So right now it's that particular step, so next it would be load locations. That's how you can identify. But if you don't have access to the workflow, how you can check that? So okay, so I'll go here. Now I think we should have one more record here because we triggered one more workflow, right? Yeah, so 6:31 it's running now. So now it's doing load locations, right? So from this, how you have to read it is, so load location is here, right? Okay. So if you see this one, load items. So once the load item is done, next step ID is load locations. So next step ID is specify that. So once you complete the load items, go for the load locations. Okay. So once the load locations is completed, it should go to, see here. Once the load location is completed, it will go for the check option. Load, lo load location is completed, and next step is load history. Okay. So that's how we can identify which step is executed after the completion of the current step. Okay. So if you see the definition of the workflow also, it will be the same. It will be in the same order. So after locations, it is history, right? So that's how we can identify the sequential order of the steps from the this table, from WF schemas table. From this table, you can identify the sequence of steps to be executed when you run any workflow. So when you talk about any workflow options, right? So you need to make sure you need to be aware of these tables: WF process log, WF schemas. So there's one more table called portal underscore task. So if the workflow fails with any seeded error, right? So that captures the details in this particular table. Okay. I think the workflow is completed. EPS full download. Completed. So it's waiting for the notification step. Okay. Okay, so we have to remember this. So the way you join the tables is, so workflow schemas, you'll get a schema ID. So using that schema ID, you can check the status of the workflow in the WS process log. If something goes wrong, if you have any errors, you can check in the portal underscore task table. Okay, this is how you can identify the records. So here you have the process ID in this table. So using the process ID from this table, you can check in this particular table. And there should be one more table, generally not used, but let me try to find that. Schema. It's a table with schema groups. Owner
You need to
DM.
remove the percentage from the front.
No, that should be okay, right?
No, but it is not showing any table, right? Is it
Yeah,
DM or
this is
Demantra?
no, it's DM only.
Okay.
This should be a table. Owners. Okay. Oh, it's Demantra. Okay. Sorry, I think, yeah, it should be the schema name. So my schema name is Demantra. Series group. There is something called schema groups. I wrote correctly, right?
You have written schemas as
Yes, yes.
this extra.
Yeah. So here you can see that groupings. Okay, so the one which you created, right? So you can see these details here. Generally not is. So these are the main important tables when you want to write, check the status of the work from the backend. You should be aware of these tables. Okay. So let me get this workflow again. So if I try to add one more step here, so if I try to save this definition, right, it will throw an error saying that the starting step is not at the first, okay, because this is in the sequence it's a second step, the way we are pointing. So if you want to change the order of this, you can simply right click on this and you can make this a starting step of the workflow. Now it can be valid. Okay. So this is how we can create the workflows. And the launch workflow step is simple, like when you add this step here, so I'll add it to this and you can call the workflow form to this. You can select the list of workflows. So I'm just selecting the same workflow again. So again it will trigger the same workflow, okay? Or you can select any other workflow, for example, EBS full download, even anything. Okay, you can write it. Okay, this is how you can play with the worksheets, sorry, workflows. Okay, there's other steps also, condition steps. If you want to keep the workflow in a waiting status, right, or if you want to progress it, okay, based on the condition, you can use this. If the certain SQL statement is satisfied, then only go to the next step. Okay, these kind of conditions also you can add in the workflow steps. Okay, if you go through any seeded workflows, right, you can understand these different steps, how they work when they execute in a sequential on a certain particular step. Okay. And you were asking about the refresh worksheet one, right?
Yes, yes.
So there is no
And
worksheet.
is there a workflow to gather the stats?
Gather
Like,
stats. There's a seeded procedure.
okay,
There's a standard
okay,
package for this. See,
okay.
thorough DB schema check. Okay.
Hmm.
So this is a table. Yeah, table. So basically, this will
Okay,
check the reorg. Okay. It will
okay,
give you the recommendations, but it will not trigger the reorg concept.
okay, okay.
Okay. Yeah, there's a workflow. This is a standard procedure which we use. Because most of the cases these activities are not scheduled because this is a
Hmm.
maintenance activity done by the DB based on the system availability, right, downtime availability. So yeah, but there's a workflow to check the stats.
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
so
But
the
it will
refresh
not
works.
gather it, right? It will just collect it. But it will
Yes,
just
yes.
show the recommendations.
Right, I think where it show, let me check that. There's a table I think for this. 1 minute, let me check.
Okay, okay. No, because sometimes there is performance issue, right? So sometimes if we get the stats, then that can be solved.
Yeah, in general, if you go to the Oracle support link, right? So
Hmm.
if you check for the table reorg concept, they'll give some seeded SQL queries where it shows that if you run those SQL queries, it will provide
Hmm.
like what should be the threshold, what should be the uh, threshold limit, uh, system is okay to use. If it exceeds the threshold limit, right, then the
Hmm.
system will suggest you go for the reorg. There's something called 0.75 limitation, something. Okay.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
if you run those sequels, that will help you to understand whether the reorg is required or not. If you go with the
Okay.
meta link, if you search for the reorg keyword,
Uh-huh.
right, you'll get those
Uh-huh.
sequels.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
check
I'll check
reorg,
it
right?
once.
I think those sequels, same sequels I used here. If I go. Earlier it was manually executed by the DBA, but now they have given
Mm.
the seeded procedure itself.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, same sequels. These are
Hmm.
basically these tables. Reorg original CF, right? So generally
Okay.
these queries are given in the meta link. So you can manually execute this SQL separately outside the from the SQL developer. You can identify whether the reorg is required or not.
Hmm.
See these sequels. If you want, I can send you those sequels I should have in the backup. So you can use those
Please
for the
send it
reorg.
if you have it. And also, if you have a query to check the workflow status, please send that also.
Okay, yeah. Mm, yes, I'll ping you that.
Okay.
So there's on the reorg. Actually, you were asking one more, right? The cashier worksheet refresh, right?
Mm-hmm. I've
So
seen a step here. If you
yes,
see
it's
the
there
workflow
here.
step, right?
Correct,
Huh.
correct. There's a step here. I saw
Hmm.
this workflow worksheet step. Not this one. There's something else also. Refresh was
Huh.
there. Worksheet
Yeah,
cache
huh,
step
this one. Yeah.
is the one.
But I don't know, like how to use it. Like, you give the worksheet name, then will it work automatically? But I never
Uh,
tried.
I'll check this one. I never used it.
Okay.
I'll check and I'll let you know.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
I'll make a note of this. I'll go through this one.
Okay.
Okay. So this on the workflow. So there one more step, right, which I have not discussed. This transfer step is the main step. So every client will have this custom process importing and exporting a data. So I'll explain this how this works also when we go to the import process step. Okay. So I'll not start methods today. We'll start tomorrow. So I'll give that query right away since we have some 5 to 10 minutes, right? Because
Okay.
the methods will
And
take time.
and also one more thing, I installed that Oracle 10G and SQL Developer. You told, right? You will show how to install the mantra once.
Can we do that tomorrow?
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Do I need to download anything for the mantra?
So I given the patch ID, right? Demand the patch also.
हाँ 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 हाँ
Okay. Can you download that patch?
ठीक है okay
Okay. Yeah. So this is my def left schemas, right? So this is one. Okay. So this is how you can get the status. So since I terminated that workflow, right? I just clicked on the terminate workflow when I launched the EBS form download. So that's the reason it's
mm,
showing -1. Okay, -1 is -1 you get when the workflow is terminated. Zero is completed normal, and one is running.
okay. And what if it is an error? It will show -1.
So basically, here you see that. So if something goes wrong when you trigger the workflow,
Mm,
so there are two
mm,
places you can check that. So one is you can check in the portal underscore task.
okay
You can check that. Okay, and else you can check in the collaborator log file.
okay okay
Okay, the two places you can check in the what's the basically from the tables you'll get the very you will not get the entire picture because there's a limitation to show on the table column, right? You cannot show
Mm.
maximum size of the message. So if you want to get the complete picture of the error message, you have to go to the collaborator log file. It captures everything. Where is a worksheet error or a workflow error, you get in the collaborator log file.
Okay, okay.
Okay. I'll ping you this query. Which version of Demantra are you using right now? The project which you are working, it's the latest version.
Sorry, sorry. It's 12.2.9 is there. Something is there, right?
Okay, okay, okay. It's not the latest. 12.11 is the latest version.
Oh, we have 9.
Yeah, okay. So if you have any questions, you can ask Ithika, Srini, and Niladri. I can cover this because methods it will take some time, so I'll not go for this today. I just will stop for workflows today. Okay, so I'll go with this training content which I sent you guys. So I'll go through the topics. So in this document, right, there are so many things which are self-explanatory. Maybe I can skip that, but if you have any questions, ask me on those things. Like for example, who is online? Okay, so basically, this generally where you get this window is when you log into here, right? So the right side will get a who is online window. So it will show you like who is currently working the who is currently using the Demantra system, who is not using online offline window is show up, which shows here. You can configure that. Maybe I can configure and show you that. uh, okay. So tomorrow I'll try to mark what are things we have covered, and rest all we can take it up. And one more thing what I want to discuss is this part, right? These parts which I may not be able to show in the system because for this we need the integrated system. Demantra should be integrated with the ASCP environment. Maybe I can walk you through the document, a standard document, but I may not be able to show in the system this part and this one. Okay, because I don't have access or I don't have the what you call integrated system, right? Maybe we can discuss this uh, theoretically, but we may not see the practical. But rest all we can go through this. Okay, that's all other stuff.